Hello everybody, welcome to week 3. This week we're moving into the symbolic communication portion of the class, and we are going to begin by talking about language. Now the question that we should be asking ourselves at the very beginning is, well, what is language? Well, this is a very complicated question. We're going to provide a simple but utilitarian answer for the sake of this course, which is language is just a code. Think of it as a culturally determined set of sounds and images and marks that we have agreed upon as a people has some sort of meaning. So let's take it at the very basic level. Let's talk about phonemes. Now, phonemes are small packets of sound. They're the smallest units of sound that you can have that actually carry meaning. So what I'm doing right now when I'm speaking to you is I am stringing together sounds. I'm stringing together phonemes to create words. At its very basic form, though, you have like this. We have here the letter C, which is a visual representation of a sound. That's what the alphabet is. It's visual representations of sounds, and you string them together to create words. This represents the phoneme K. Now, if we pair it with another, it could represent the phoneme Sh or Ch or something along those lines. But for here, right now, it represents K. So, following that, we have the symbol A, which stands for the A sound. And then there's the T, the letter T, which stands for the T sound. String this together, you have K, A, T, K, A, T, or cat. Or this. Now, the thing to remember is that there's no inherent reason why CAT and the sounds that they represent come together to create the idea of this. Language is a step back from reality in a sense. You're using sounds, you're creating sounds to represent something in the physical or even the metaphysical world. We have words that can be used to represent abstract concepts that we have no actual physical contact with. We have words that describe very ambiguous and ephemeral concepts such as love and hate, which can lead to physical actions, but still they're part of our internal world. We have words that describe death and life, which are very abstract concepts in themselves. And so this is the power of language, is that language can encompass just about anything as long as we agree upon the code. And so the verbal language, our oral language, is a step away from the reality that it's trying to describe, making almost a separate reality of language. And you can take that a step further and say that the written language, like here I have the word this written, that is that's a secondary step, an even greater step away from the reality that it's trying to describe. And so, as you can see, it's getting further and further away from reality in a sense, which is important in allowing for it to encompass these abstract concepts. But this also creates problems because there's no one-to-one ratio between the word cat and the animal cat. We just agree that this series of sounds or letters or what have you, or even this picture here, this is not a cat that you're looking at. This is a picture of a cat. And so we agree that it represents that, but this is where miscommunications come in because the code is incomplete. It is not perfect. If there were a universal platonic word or symbol that would represent everything that this cat is, then there would never be any miscommunications. But that's not how the world works, and it's actually probably for the best when you consider art. So, kind of to drive this point home, what if you don't speak English? What else is this animal called? Well, in Armenia, it's katu. In Cantonese, it's meow. In Japanese, it's neko. In French, it is chat. In Russia, they actually have two different words. One is koshka, if it's female, and another is kot, which is male. And what's interesting to me, at least, is that you have even like Katu, Koshka, and Kot. They do have similar sounds to represent this animal, which could be coincidental or it could be there's been some language borrowing along the way. Certainly, French is the closest. It just has an extra letter in there. So what we're talking about really is semiotics, or the science of signs and sign systems. And there are two very good videos that have been provided for you on the course site that talk about this more. And so, since they do a better job than I do, I'm going to let them do most of the work. But this is where symbology comes in. This is why symbols are important, because signs and sign systems are units of meaning. They carry a great deal of information that in some ways is dependent upon context. And so if you're not understanding of the context, if you're not given, to go back to our metaphor of code, if you don't understand the code, then you're not going to properly interpret sounds. And again, this is the failure of language in some sense. Language is not perfect, but because it's not perfect, and I know I'm repeating myself, but it bears repeating, because it's not perfect, that allows you as writers, as artists, to play with it and make it do things that people haven't really thought of, and that can create beauty and mystery and suspense and all of these wonderful experiences for your readers. So let's return to cats. Everybody loves cat pictures on the internet, even people who don't like cats. It's one of those rules of the universe, like what comes up must come down. So when I say the word cat, or when I write the word cat, or even give you a picture of a cat, what are some things that you think of? Do you think of something cuddly, like a companion? Do you think of something dangerous, like a predator? Do you think of something supernatural, like a witch's familiar? On a side note, this connotation, this connection between black cats especially and dark magic has had a pretty terrible side effect in that a lot of people don't want to adopt black cats. The Humane Society and other organizations like that have released statistics saying that of the cats that have been put to sleep in shelters because nobody wants to adopt them, black cats make up the majority. So this is a very powerful and unfortunate connection. Do you think of something wise and enigmatic like the Sphinx? That's my favorite cat picture, by the way, out of this slideshow. So the idea here is for you to understand that one word can contain a multiple meanings. If I describe somebody as a cool cat, that doesn't mean that they're a chilly feline. It means this is a neat person, a person who is somebody I find interesting and whatnot. And so again, this multiplicity of meaning is something that you can capitalize on in your own work. But it's not just words. words kind of form the basis, but we have so many different ways of communicating, which is important. I'm talking right now and I'm keeping a measured tone. I'm kind of in my teacher voice right now, and that signals to you something else. If I were to talk more like, and yeah, it's not just words, it's like signs and stuff like that. And, if I sound bored or uninterested or whatever, that's going to convey information. That's going to color the words that I'm using. So obviously, we have our oral language, we have our written language. We also have gestures. There are certain physical gestures that we have that convey meaning. Obviously, this guy is holding up the peace sign, but depending on context, that could also be a victory sign. If you flip it around, then you are effectively flipping the bird to people if you are from Great Britain. And so, two fingers being held up can mean a lot of different things. And that's just, of course, the tip of the iceberg. We also have signs. Signs can be more abstract. They can be more concrete. Right here on this picture, you have all of these different signs pointing to different places. Remote Oregon, Crater Lake, waterfront, and whatnot, and it gives the mileage. But you see also that these are shaped like arrows, so it's showing you visually, hey, go this way. If we went back to the stop sign picture, you would know what that meant, even if the word stop had not been written on there, because we have been trained to look at a hexagon in this context as meaning stop. You could have just a red hexagon and you would understand what that means. And so signs can contain a great deal of information, a great deal of powerful information, but because they are even further along the symbolic chain that we've been talking about, this chain of removal, where, language is one step removed, written language is 2 steps removed, signs would probably be 3 steps removed, there's a greater chance for misinterpretation. And so this is where you kind of have to be careful. It's also why signs, depending on cultural context and time, can mean a lot of different things. I mean, if you were to look up, say, the moon, for example, the moon holds a host of different meanings depending on the culture and history, and sometimes they can even hold contradictory meanings as well, because for whatever reason the sign has changed, the meaning of the sign has changed over time. So just to recap, when we're talking about language and symbolic communication, we're talking about really 4 different elements or aspects. We have speech, we have writing, we have gestures, and we have signs. We could add to this, we could talk about body language, we could talk about voice tone, we could talk about facial expressions and things like that. I mean, there are so many different ways that we communicate, and understanding how to properly read them is incredibly important for functioning in society. As a writer, understanding this will also help you have a better command of the language that you use in your work, of the signs that you use in, the symbols that you use in your stories. Also in how the characters act and interact. How do they talk? What's their voice? Are there any inflections on the words that they use? What's their tone? What's their body language like? You can play around with that, and you can have a character who is saying a lot more than just the words that are coming out of his or her mouth. So, as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, and I'm more than happy to answer them. Or if you just want to talk more about it, that's perfectly fine too. So, this should be a really fun week. I enjoy a great deal talking about language and symbols, and so it should be fun on the bun.